Well, we got another Jordan. I wouldn't quite call it a flu game. We will call it. We're a man down, though. I am sans one less wisdom tooth this week, so I'm just a little bit dumber than normal. And welcome back to TLDR. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens. I get jacked up with Novocaine. My face is fucking numb, and I forget how to do the goddamn open of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, listeners of all ages, Geeks Worldwide Radio and the Dork Shared Gooniverse proudly presents to you the greatest, and Nick, I mean the absolute greatest podcasting team in the world. I'm your friendly neighborhood backcracker, Dr. Joe. He's the Fry guy, Nick Friar. Together, we are the TLDR Comic Book Club, baby. Nicholas, how you doing?
I am doing outstanding, and holy shit, nice recovery. Bravo,
thank
sir.
you.
That was
Thank you.
impressive. Of course, we're not the only ones that are doing well, because we did find out a little bit of news about a comic that you have talked about on the show that we'll get to in a second. But before we do that, I just want to remind the people that if you're finding us on Doc's Twitch stream, maybe over on Twitter, if you're just watching us somewhere, not listening to us in audio form, make sure you go subscribe to the show in audio form as well. And the reason why you want to have both, if you're not just doing audio, because we only have our Friar side chats over there whenever we have creators from the industry on the show. And actually, one of the books we're talking about today, we have had the writer of that series on the show quite a few times in the past, and he did talk about that series, but that's a conversation for a little bit later. Just a reminder, go subscribe over there, leave a rating and review, 5 stars only, otherwise you're going to learn what backcracker really means. But Joe, the book that you talked about in the past that got optioned for a TV show is actually a book that I was supposed to fucking talk about on this show, but you robbed me of it. What book is that?
I can tell you it's not black tape. It is The Good Asian. We found out over the past week that it's being optioned for a television series. Jesus Christ, there's something in the air today, man. Cue Phil Collins. So this is going to be awesome because this book is perfect. So it's being optioned for TV. So here's the thing. The question I have is, it's a pretty A to B storyline. I feel like this would make a really good movie. I'm sure we'll make a really good season of a show. Maybe they could stretch it out over 2 and maybe add things here or there. So it'll be interesting to see how they adapt it to television. But what they could do is this character, this entire world. I mean, you could make a series out of this, and I know there's going to be more Good Asian. So that's probably the idea. The first volume will be one season, then when the next volume comes out, that could be another season, so on and so forth. But it's going to be gritty, pulpy, crime, noir. Love the fucking book. Everyone that's read it absolutely fucking loves it. It's no matter what, whether it's TV, movie, whatever. I can't wait. It's gonna be fantastic.
Yeah, I am very excited about it. And I mean, we talked about it a little bit when I think it was our last trade, or maybe it must have been the last trade that I did that. But must read stuff for sure. Of course, that series is from Image Comics, so just keep seeing more and more indie comics popping up for shows, more so shows than movies. It seems like right now, which personally, I don't care either way, as long as we're getting more indie comic stories, because as much as we enjoy the MCU in DC, in general, maybe not necessarily the DCU always, the best stories are definitely in indie comics, at least right now. We will talk about some of those a little bit later, but let's catch up on some of the stuff that we have been reading, Joe, that we didn't get to at least last week. What do you got for me?
Breath of Shadows, issue 2. Tremendous series so far. Drawn by Alex Cormack. Absolutely love it. Trippy as hell. Screwed up, vicious. Absolutely love it. The Scorched, issue 15. Finally, caught up on that. Again, continues just to be excellent. This was a really good issue. I thought there's some really great stuff building up in the Spawn universe right now, and this is at the center of it. And then friend of the show, John Lee's, when he was on our program, he talked, we asked him what he was reading, and he had said he's reading some manga, some Naoki Urasawa books were some of his recommendations, one of which 20th Century Boys, which I've read, talked about on the show when we had our good pal Shime on. And then a trailer gets dropped for a new Netflix anime show called Pluto, which is sort of it's part of the Astro Boy world. It's a spinoff that Urasawa did. And I read the first volume of this, Nick. I shit you not, in one night. I read it in the during the course of that shitty ass fucking Celtics game the other night. Not the one, they've had a bunch of shitty ass games, so I'm not gonna completely.
They've struggled
date
a bit
it,
lately.
right?
That is true.
But I read it. I mean, it was 200 pages on the button, and just flew right through it. Absolutely fantastic. The trailer, which I watched, having no context of what Pluto is about, or what Astro Boy is about. Really, it just looked badass. The animation was awesome. So I've been chatting with John about it. Grabbed it. Volume 2 is showing up at my house tomorrow.
Nice.
And I can't wait to fly through this, man. And this will be a book that I talk about on this show.
Nice.
It was that fucking good.
Maybe in the not so distant future, you'll talk about that on the show, perhaps.
I'll try and time it around when the show gets dropped on Netflix, perhaps.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. Good call. And then for me, I caught up on a couple Marvel books: Ghost Rider issue 12 and Immoral X-Men issue 1. Of course, Immoral X-Men is part of the larger Mr. Sinister event that's going on right now, which we can touch on actually in a second. Why don't we get to what's new and kick us off with Marvel, Joe?
All right, I'm gonna try and do this without spitting up too much blood here.
Oh man.
Yeah, we're having a day, folks.
Yeah.
So this week from Marvel, we have the Amazing Spider-Man issue 21. We have Moon Knight issue 21. We have X-Men issue 20. The Avengers issue 66. Fantastic Four issue 5. Scarlet Witch issue 3. Star Wars Bounty Hunters issue 32. Mary Jane Black Cat issue 4. Black Panther issue 15, Star Wars The High Republic issue 6, Silver Surfer Ghostlight issue 2, X-23 Deadly Regenesis issue 1, New Mutants Lethal Legion issue 1, Bloodline Daughter of Blade issue 2, Predator issue 1, Star Wars Sinisteros issue 2, and you've got a book and a comment you'd like to make this week from Marvel.
Yeah, so X-23 Deadly Regenesis, I did read that prior to the show, and it just I wanted to. I was excited, like some more X-23 stuff, but just the story is something that it could be interesting. Wasn't a huge fan of the art necessarily, just certain like images just felt like, I don't know, didn't really do it for me. So it wasn't a huge fan. This was a little bit of a disappointment of an issue. And I know sometimes you say stuff's not for me, or not great or whatever. Like it's not that it wasn't not for me. It's just I feel like it could have been done a little bit better, but that happens. Now Nightcrawlers issue 2 is out this week as part of the larger Mr. Sinister event that's going on right now. X-Men event, really. And I'll tell you what, like this is the one that I've been looking forward to most after reading all the first issues. Obviously, Immortal X-Men just came out, the first issue of that. But this is a pretty significant time jump for these characters because there's 3 series going on right now. It's the Storm one, it's the Immortal X-Men, and then it's the Nightcrawlers one. And the first round of 3 is 10 years after Mr. Sinister's plan kind of unfolds. Then it's 100 years, this is the start of that right now. And we see how these Nightcrawler characters have evolved so much. These Chimera have evolved quite a bit over the years. But at the same time, like they're still like in a shitty situation. And I love the way the art's been done here. And actually, I didn't jot down the artist of this issue. It is Andrea DeVito, and of course, friend of the show, Cy Spurrier, is the writer. But I really like what they've done here. It's a lot to take in because obviously there's a huge like gap in time from issue to issue, and this was like talked about a month ago. Like we're getting a new Mr. Sinister event thing every time, but it's hitting on different subjects throughout. So I think that as you go in, as it takes a second to like get back into it, but once things get going, it's like, all right, now this is where things going, and it's very much chaotic, but in a good way. By and large, I just love, like, I cannot wait to see what Mr. Sinister does at the end of all this, because he's in such a shit situation, even though his plan kind of came to like he accomplished what he wanted to, but it's such a mess right now. So I'm very much looking forward to if he's the one that kind of like puts the like figures things out in the end, or if it's somebody else that figures it out. But either way, this has been a fun event. It's Ewing, it's Gillen, it's Spurrier. Quite the team, of course, to be putting on something together. Now, from DC this week, we got a couple books that we want to dig into. There's The Flash 794 Hidden Shelves, Batman, The Joker, Deadly Duo issue 5, The Joker, The Man Who Stopped Laughing issue 6, Monkey Prince 12, The Flash 1 Minute War, The Nick Friar Story issue 1. And then, Joe, we have two books that you want to dig into and one that I want to touch on. Why don't you go first?
Okay, so we're gonna go Batman first because what Chip has been doing with Batman just continues to be fantastic. And he's sort of got Batman in this alternate universe, this alternate Gotham. He's got Bruce Wayne there. And again, it's kind of Knights of Steelish, where we're seeing, again, because it's an alternate universe that Bruce has found himself in. We're seeing all the familiar characters in very similar roles, but much different than how we used to see them. And it's just been so brilliant how he's done it. The action scenes have been great. Everything about the storytelling, like Chip, kind of gets Bruce in the same way that he gets Matt Murdock, right?
Mm,
He just, when he dives into a character like this, he really understands, what makes them tick. And so where we find Bruce now in this world that he's in and everything that's going on about it, it's a really great original, sort of Batman story that he's telling, which I think is tough because he's had to have written a bunch of different Batman stories, over the past, few years, right? And so being able to do that and keep it fresh and keep it engaging, is really terrific. So, if you haven't been reading Batman, if you're a Batman fan, you don't even have to have read. I mean, you kind of had to have read the failsafe, the first arc that Chip did, but even if you
mm.
just sort of pick this up and go, like, you'd be like, what the hell's going on? But it wouldn't take too long to figure out, right?
Nice.
That, and so that's really good. Like, that's what I love, because we're at, what, 133, and if you were to pick this book for the first time up off the rack, you might be a little lost, but I think you'd figure it out. But I mean, I highly recommend. I think the fail-safe arc is now out in trade paperback. I would pick that up and read that. That's Chip's first run with Batman, and this second arc, it's just been fantastic. There's not much else to say. It's just really, really
Nice.
good. Fucking read
Nice.
it.
Okay. All right. Jeez. Shit. Now the DC book that I read this week is Poison Ivy issue 10 is out this week. And obviously this one I talked about on the show a little while back. I believe it started out as a mini series and then got turned into a maxi series. I could be wrong. It may have just been originally 12 issues and then that was it. But either way, it is now an ongoing title. So very excited. It's been a little bit of a pause in the action. I feel like we haven't gotten Poison Ivy for at least a month, like, or I guess 2 months technically, maybe 3. Just been a little bit of a pause, and it probably has to do with the fact that it got extended out as much as it did. This has been a really enjoyable series. And again, I've said how like the art on this series was pretty next level. Like G. Willow Wilson doing a great job as writing it, but Mauricio Takara and Arif Prianato, the colorist on this one, quite the team. And for in this one, it's a good I think this is when you talk about like when a new reader can kind of hop in and everything like that. I know we both like to start from one. We want to start from
Yep.
zero and then just work our way up. But for those who don't necessarily want to put in that kind of work, I do think issue 10 of Poison Ivy actually is kind of a spot where you can do that. It's a bit of a transition issue. There is some stuff that maybe you miss a little bit, but still, like for people, it's been a break. It's a good chance to get back into it. Take a little side step as Poison Ivy's moving towards the next step in her journey. I feel like this could just end up being 2 issues, and then we get back to we go back to like the main directive that we had left off with. But it's a little commentary on a certain celebrity who she is known for. Is it Goop? I think is what it is. So a little bit of joking on that, and the people who are fans of that sort of thing.
You're
So
fucking disgusting, by the way. Come up with a better name than fucking Goop, please.
that's what's at the center of Poison Ivy issue 10. Really enjoy that series. And then you got one more DC, big DC week for us.
Yeah, a big DC week. Usually it's Image, where we're discussing a lot of stuff. But this week was DC because there was a couple of books that I was looking forward to. One always is going to be Batman, but two was Adventures of Superman, John Kent, issue 1, written by Tom Taylor, with art by Clayton Henry. And I mean, I love Taylor's, first run with John Kent, Superman, son of Kal-El, and talk about a guy that, a writer that understands, his characters. Tom Taylor's really sort of, he's taken John Kent and just really, run with the character. And so this was a really great first issue. I wouldn't call it a reintroduction to the character, and it doesn't quite feel like a continuation, but it is, because we're seeing, John Kent's boyfriend Jay Nakamura is back in this first issue, with him. But the story that unfolds, the antagonists that Tom Taylor has set up here for John Kent, is kind of next level. And it was really fun to read through this book and see what he's sort of got planned and where he's going to take it. So I don't know how many issues this plans to be, if it's going to be ongoing or if it's going to be a limited series or whatnot. But again, Tom Taylor's so hot right now, right? There's a reason why DC scooped him up and is not letting him go, because he's just DC's just done a really good job lately. Like, yeah, they lost Tynan, but they gained Chip and Tom Taylor, right? Like, they're not fucking around, right? And I like to see that, because right now DC's writing some of my favorite books along with Image and AWA and Dark Horse and Move and all that. So like, usually, like, we don't talk a lot about the big two, but I feel like at least with them it's been mostly DC driven. But Superman, John Kent issue 1, it was really good. So if you're a fan of the character, I would definitely suggest picking it up.
You do realize our last mainline episode was an all DC episode, right?
Right. That's what I'm talking about, right? Like, we've talked more about DC recently than I think we have in the 2+ years.
Well, no. Remember we did the whole future state thing?
Right. That was a year ago, Nicholas. Right?
But you're saying in the 2 years, you're saying in the entirety of the show, we've talked about DC a lot. I'm just saying.
I would say if I were to pull out an old school WEEI reference and fucking Eddie Animal's fucking pie,
wow.
right? Like, a major chunk of that fucking pie is going to be Image, and then the next big chunk is going to be AWA, and then it's going to be Boom, and then I would say it would be DC Marvel.
I would not say Boom, like, in terms of what we've talked about, but
I'll run through my goddamn books right here on the show.
Okay. We'll do that. That'll be our next show. Joe's gonna run through all his books. I'm gonna have him on mute the whole time. Let's see. We got Image. Why don't you take us through it?
Okay, so Image. We have one sec here. We've got, I can read. Spawn issue 339, Blood Tree issue 2. We have Two Graves issue 5. We have Almighty issue 2, Gospel issue 5, Arc issue 1. We have Stoneheart issue 1, which I did read. This was written and drawn by Emma Kubert. And I gotta say, like, you mentioned it earlier, like, we read books and we I think we do a really good job of trying not to be overly negative. Like, when something stinks, we'll say it fucking stinks. But I think there's times when we read a book, it's just not for me, right? Like, this book just wasn't for me. It everything about it, like, it sounded like it would be, but I didn't connect with it. And so, but I think I don't want to say this was geared towards young adult readers, but I think like, this is a good book to give someone who's getting into, like, fantasy books, maybe like for the first time. There was just something about it. It just wasn't for me. I'm not saying it was a bad it was a bad book or anything like that by any means. It just, wasn't my cup of tea. But I think it had. I think by the end of it, it had potential. Just for me, it didn't. It didn't do that.
Yep.
Get its hooks into me like a lot of other books that Image does.
Mhm.
But there's a book that we both want to talk about this week, Nicholas. Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, Rogue Sun issue 11. And I got to say, Joe, I feel like more and more lately, for myself at least, I have been blown away by some of the colorists in the industry. Of course, Abel, the artist on the series, and Ryan Parrott, love the work that they do. But I got to say, like, you look at the first page here, and I'm sure some people have seen it from previews and whatnot. If they're putting them out there from Image, I tend to not look at those, just we get them early enough. But Natalia Mark's work on the first page is just, and we got one of those vertical spreads again. It's
You got a
just
few of them.
yeah, we got everything in like the aviary area is all like vertical spreads and awesome line work. But my God, some of like the stuff that like it's crazy how shiny some of the shit looks in its two-dimensional. You know what I mean? It's like it's coming off of a comic book page. And I'm not saying you haven't seen things that look shiny, but it's like got a glimmer to it almost. And I just feel like we don't see that every day when we're reading comics. So really impressive color work here. And also Raven Queen. I am a big fan of hers for
Little
multiple
smitten,
reasons.
a little
Yep.
smitten.
Yep.
Yeah.
She is tough. She's tough too. And I love that about her.
Yeah, this was such a good issue from multiple standpoints, right? Like from a storytelling standpoint, excellent. Excellent. I loved Dylan in this issue.
Mm,
I thought he was great. But we get as always, issue by issue, we get more layers to the story here, and again, this continues, I think, to be, it's like 1 and 1A for me with this and like the Dead Lucky. But from an art standpoint as well, like you mentioned, the art, in this book is so crisp
hmm
and it's so clean, and that's it's one of the things that they have nailed with the Massiveverse is across all the books. The art has been fantastic,
hmm
absolutely fantastic, right? For me, like, it's the colors in the Dead Lucky. I love, the colors there. I love the colors here in Rogue Sun. There's a there's a grittiness about Rogue Sun's art without it being gritty at all,
hmm
if that makes sense,
100%. Yeah, I feel
right?
like a lot of the times it comes from the colors, actually.
Yeah, and so this was such a good issue. I gave the first volume to my nephew, and he absolutely loved it. Right, like this is a book
Nice.
for everyone, and Ryan Parrott has been killing it again. I love writers who give us great characters, right? And
Mm,
we're gonna get into that a little bit more when I talk about my book this week, coming from one of the Mount Rushmore writers. But when you get great character work, the story, it all comes together, right? But that's what it is, because you want to see that character evolve. You want to see, you love the ups and the downs of everything. And so, like, we get that here with Rogue Sun, and this issue in particular. I thought we saw some growth here with Dylan. He seemed like he was
hmm.
still arrogant, um, but he wasn't so much of a prick here. and,
uh,
and and he actually seemed to be having some fun.
mhm.
And there was some good, there was some good levity with his character in this issue. So, um, yeah, great shit.
And also too, just want before we move on, the designs too. Like when you talk about
Oh
the
yeah,
artwork, like it's very consistent throughout. And I believe we definitely talked about Rogue Sun's design. And again, that's a massive verse strength in general, but specifically when we're looking here at Rogue Sun, just this issue alone. So Rogue Sun, obviously great design. I like the Raven Queen's design quite a bit. Her doorman's design with like that
the
with the
doorman, the
plague mask.
best.
Oh
Yeah,
my God,
awesome.
awesome. And then
Mhm.
I'm drawing a blank on the other villain who's like kind of at the center of things now.
Oh yeah,
But
yes.
yeah, but his design is great as well. 4 characters, awesome design.
And this gives us a great opportunity to talk about the letterer. I don't have the letter off the top of my head, but like the lettering with the villain there,
Mm.
fantastic. The dialogue
Becca
boxes,
Carey, she's
yes,
like doing
thank you.
all massive verse stuff. It seems like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. fantastic work.
Mm-hmm.
It really stood out this issue.
Mm-hmm.
So just we will never not talk about this stuff enough, and I don't even know if we can really properly do it justice. The Massiverse is just that fucking good.
Yeah, awesome must read stuff for sure. All right, I'm going to take us through everything else, Joe, before we get to your book. So from Boom, we got Know Your Station issue 5, which you're reading. From AWA, we got Black Tape issue 2, which I am reading, not you. From
Not this
IDW,
weekend.
well, yeah, I don't have the review copy. Otherwise, I would be talking about it, I'm sure. IDW, TMNT, The Armageddon Game, The Alliance issue 5. From Skybound, Little Red Ronin issue 1. From Vault, West of Sundown issue 9, which you are reading. From Dynamite, we got Cherish issue 5, Vampirella versus Red Sonja issue 5. And then last but not least, we did not forget about Dark Horse, but there's a reason that we're talking about him last. If you've been with us for a while, you would know why. Assassin's Apprentice issue 4, Space Job issue 2, which you are reading, and then a book that I am now allowed to read because you are talking about it on the show today, The Claire issue 1.
Yes, this is a book I've been dying to talk about, and I would have talked about a heck of a lot sooner, but with the with the Scottober Comixology books that came out way back when, we decided we would wait to talk about them until they came out in print form. And I don't know all the details as to why the Clear took as long as it did to come into print form, but it is here, folks. You can now go to your local comic book shop and pick up The Clear from Dark Horse Comics and Comixology, written by Scott Snyder, with art by Francis Manapul. And oh shit, I forgot to write the letterer. I'm a fucking dingus.
Attaboy, good job. I'll
Yeah,
get you in a second. Go ahead.
thank you. That really makes me mad. I'm sorry about that. My apologies. We'll get to that in a second. But this was, I think, the first book that I had drafted when we did our Comixology draft, because you snaked the first pick and took We Have Demons. But I was very excited about this because I love Manipul's art. He's got a very beautiful, vibrant, style to his art, and he did the colors as well. And so I was very excited to read this. So, synopsis: in the not too distant future, mankind no longer sees the world as it truly is. The invention of neurological filters has made it so one can view reality however they may choose. Old Hollywood monochrome, zombie apocalypse, animate. The possibilities are endless. Neo Seamus Sam Dunes is one of only a handful who choose to live without a filter. When the death of an old flame reveals foul play, Dunes is set on a wild and twisting mystery that will take him from the city's deadly underworld to the even deadlier heights of wealth and power.
Real quick, it's
Yeah.
And World Designs. That's the letterer.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. I meant to fucking write that down, and Jesus, I don't.
Well, it's
I
not
hate
on.
that.
It's in fairness to you, it's not on League of Comic Geek. It's only on the review copy. So
Right,
okay,
but
easy.
I should have taken the extra step there.
I'm trying to make
So
you look like less of a dick for once.
I appreciate you, Nicholas. So originally released on through Comixology as 6 individual issues, but with Dark Horse, I believe they've been doing this with all these books. They've been releasing them as 3 multi-issue floppies. So I believe that the first issue that is dropping on New Comic Book Day this week will contain the first 2 issues. And they'll release that 2 more times, obviously taking us to 6. That is math with TLDR. So one of the I've talked about this time and time again with Snyder's writing, and is that he kind of throws all these threads out there, and then he's just a master at weaving them together and then pulling it together so that it comes together in this tight, perfect bow, right? And whether it's horror or crime or it Batman, or it's whatever, like he's just got a way of telling so many different types of stories so well, so uniquely, but in a way that keeps you constantly engaged, right? And so the way this book starts off is it starts off with several pages, or a few. I shouldn't say several, but the first few pages, it's pure narration, and it's a character who you can't see, sort of, telling a joke, right? And it's sort of like a joke kind of story, and you're like, where the hell is this going? And all the while, in the background, you're focused on this female character, and she's just sort of going, you know, you see sort of what she's doing, and as this narrator's telling this story of a doctor in an asylum where the asylum is on fire, and he's doing his best to try and rescue all the inmates. He's got, sort of an impossible choice he's got to make. I'll do this, and I'll entrust this person to do that, and hopes it all comes together. And of course, it doesn't. But as we're reading the narration and getting that story, we're seeing sort of what's happening in the background. And all that ends with this female character sort of, plunging to what appears to be her inevitable death. And then we get introduced to our main character, Sam Dune. So I thought that was a very sort of interesting way to sort of kick off this book, because you don't know really what the fuck is going on, right? But you're engaged, right? Because what you're reading and what you're seeing are two different things, and you're trying in your head to figure out, like, how are these things related? Like, what's the message here? What's the metaphor here, right? How is this going to play, with the rest of the issue? And that sort of, that happens, and then we get introduced to, like I said, Sam Dunes, who's our main character. So one of the things that I picked up right away from reading this book is that, again, it's this futuristic sort of noir crime story in the vein of sort of Maltese Falcon, which takes place in, the early part of the 20th century there, right? But it's a crime story. The main character in the Maltese Falcon is Sam Spade, right? And in this book, it's Sam Dunes, right? So there's and I think we talked to Scott about this, where he kind of pulled from that a little bit, or drew some inspiration from that a little bit. So right away, like, I get those vibes, and I'm in, because I'm a crime, sort of mystery junkie, and that's sort of what the heart of this book is. It's a mystery, with a lot of different moving parts, and then the way Snyder ties them all together, is brilliant. And what I love is this idea of, you can choose your reality. You literally, is taking the term, right, rose-colored glasses.
It's a great concept,
right? And so, like the sort of synopsis said, you want to be, anime, right, world, you can choose to live your world and see your world as an anime style, or The Last of Us, or whatever, right?
Have you thought about what you would want to see?
Oh God. I should have anticipated, you asking me this question, so I could have a good, you know what, I'll tell you right now. You ready for this? Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. Right?
That's a good call.
That's
like
one
that.
of my all-time favorite movies, and I
Sure.
love the animation in that, right? And again, because it's very artistic, it's very stylistic, it's very it's bright and vibrant. I love that. And even though this book sort of takes place in sort of this I don't want to call it, it's not post-apocalyptic, so this dystopian sort of grimy future. Manipul's art is still, like, his use of neons in this is still, like, you find some brightness in this really, really fucking dark world. But that's what I'd choose.
I think it's a
What
good
about
pick.
you?
I think I'm not sure which, like, comic book art style I pick. Like, I obviously, like, I like Javier Fernandez's work a lot, but I feel like that would give me nightmares all the friggin' time. I like, Abel and Sean Murphy's art style, but I don't know if I'd necessarily want that, like, modified to fit in the real world. But I think, like, Stegman, or maybe like Joe Madureira. Like, I think one of them two. Like, I like their art style a lot. They get after it. So something along those
You'd be
lines.
fucking sauntering around as if you were fucking Geralt of Rivia. Who the fuck are you fooling?
Yeah, I did think about that. Like if it was like a medieval time. Yes, that did cross my mind too. Yes.
Yeah. No, because that wouldn't be a bad one either, right? So something
Yeah.
like that. But so, like, I love that concept. But within that concept, there's a couple of other concepts as well. So the title of the book, Clear, right? It was, again, it was mentioned in the synopsis that our main character Sam Dunes just chooses not to wear one of these veils, or
Mhm.
filters, right? He wants to see the world clearly, right? So that's sort of where the title. So he sees the world for the shit cesspool that's it's sort of become. And what's great about that, as we progress through the story, you find out why, what happened to him in his past that's making him choose, to do that. And then you have this idea of shared veils, which have been outlawed, which is, people sort of sharing the same sort of, seeing the same thing together.
Hmm.
And again, you find out, why this is, the chaos that ensued when this was first developed, and this sort of becomes a major plot point. And then you got black veils, which are sort of like black market veils. Like, there's the ones that you can buy, and then there's, like, if you want to get, black veils are, veils and filters that you can see, but no one can get, like, access to, like, no one, so, like, they're very shady. And so, like, if you're trying to hide something or keep something secret, you would use a black veil. And that's, again, sort of where the story begins. When we meet our main character Sam Dunes, he's sort of this disgraced detective who's sort of been bumped down. I wouldn't say to beat cop, but essentially he's, his job is to go around and, you know find, people selling these black market, veils, these black
Mm.
veils. And, kind of a for hire as well. Like, we get introduced to a character named Mrs. Matters, who hires Sam because she thinks her husband, might be cheating on her, something's going on. And so, like, he acts as sort of like a private, detective, to see if he is in fact, buying, these black veils. And so, like, it starts off like simple enough. Like, we get introduced to, a detective, and he's on the case, and one thing leads to another, and then boom, you're sucked into this world now, where now, there's a lot more going on, than meets the eye. And the way this first issue ends, I debated, we had this talk before, because this story has been out, for a while.
Mm.
And I was going to sort of talk about how the first issue ended, but then I said, no, it's too good of a moment. And then I also realized, oh, the first issue of this is also 2 issues long. So, like, it's not really the end, it's just sort of, you know, right,
Oh, that's actually really interesting too when you put it. I didn't even think about that if they're doing the double issues. Yeah, that's a whole
right.
nother ball of wax.
But so, like,
Hmm.
if you're reading, like, the
Interesting.
floppy, right, you're gonna know what I'm talking about, because there's a moment that happens, and it's the real catalyst of what propels this story forward, and what makes it such a tour de force of storytelling, and mystery. And again, it's sort of, that's the other thing. Like I said, like, he throws these threads out there, and then he pulls them together, right? So, like, that thread I talked about at the beginning, like, where is this going with the narration? Who is this mysterious character? And then the way he ties that small little thread together,
Hmm.
and then unleashes a whole bevy of new ones. It's absolutely tremendous. And I think this is why I can't speak for you, Nick, but I know for me, again, why I like, Snyder's storytelling so much, is that it's just, he just has a way of roping you in that's so different than, some of the other writers.
Hmm.
Sean Lewis has his way of roping in. Rodney Barnes has his way, right? Like, everyone, that's what makes these writers so unique, right? Because
Speaking of Rodney, Jesus,
it's
Jason John Alexander's gonna give me like a. He's killing me.
yeah.
Waiting
Well,
for issue
Rodney
30.
told us himself. So
Yeah, I know.
we
Jeez, the
we,
buildup.
we I know. But,
Anyways.
and I think that's another thing that's made, like, this, this line of books that Snyder's writing for Dark Horse / Comixology is, I can't I can't even begin to fathom how he does it, right? Because we've talked about, We Have Demons, on
Mm,
the show. We've talked about Night of the Ghoul. Those are two wildly, drastically, different stories, right? You're
mm.
reading Canary, Barnstormers, right? I can't say this enough about Barnstormers, right? I had this idea of what Barnstormers was going to be,
Yeah.
and it's so, like, flipped on its head and got me going, Jesus. like you talk about don't judge a book by its cover. Well, like, don't necessarily always judge a book by its synopsis either, right? Because it's so much more. He has a way
Yeah.
of taking this romantic idea he has of and that he loves of this certain period of time, and then finding a way to like, oh, that's kind of fucked. I love it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. And so, like, if you're like me, right, if you love a good crime noir pulp style story, like this is going to be right up your art, right up your alley. And I haven't even gotten to the art yet. I've talked about it a little
Yeah.
bit, but Manipul's art I absolutely love. And I was actually first introduced to Francis Manipul's art by Snyder with the Nocterra book,
Hmm.
right? Because when we did the Kickstarter for that, and sort of the script that we got right before Nocterra, launched, I had also purchased a couple of extra prints so that I could hang up here in Bag End. And one of them is Maniples, and it is just there's a vibrancy and an electricity to his art that it just pulls me in.
Mm.
Like I love Dan Mora and his style
Yeah.
because it's epic. Same thing with Fernandez, and I love Jason Son Alexander's art because it's so raw and vicious, right?
Mm.
And Manipul, like I said earlier, he's able to take this world that's kind of dark and dingy, and sort of put his own neon veil on it, right?
Hmm.
And it's just so good. It's a futuristic Maltese Falcon, and I love that so fucking much.
Now, Manipul is the just the artist straight up on this. He
Mhm.
does the colors for his own work here, and I'm curious. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not like obviously like we're familiar with Manipul's work because I did read this first issue when we had Scott on a while back, but it's been such a long time that I gonna reread this before before anything else. But with Manipul's art, like, could you? I guess like if you're seeing Manipul on a book, are you thinking like now going forward, like I want to see him doing his own colors every time too? Like is
Oh,
that
100%. 100. It's like Marco Lesko.
mm,
Like Marco Lesko, a lot of times he does the art and the colors, right? And
did he do the art in on Chariot?
I think he did. Maybe not. But
Right,
like
keep
I
going.
love his colors, right?
Hmm.
So like I see Marco Lesko, I know it's going to be a beautifully
Yeah,
colored
wasn't
book,
yeah, that
right?
was Priscilla Petrades who did the
Right.
art on that one.
Right. And did she do the art on, I know she did the art on Hit Me. She did
Yes.
also
Yes.
with Chariot as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, right, like I see Manipul, I think for the most part, he's done a lot. And maybe this is the only one, I don't know, but like it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I love when artists also do their own coloring. It's sort of like, the writer director thing, right? Like they have
Hmm.
their vision, right? Like, and so you see that here, and the world that he's created. It's just gorgeous. And so he's become one of my favorite artists.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just can't rave about this book enough. This was, at the time I remember reading it, and I remember we read this, and We Have Demons, at least read the first issue of that, because when we had to have one go, I think I like this one better. It was
You
just
did at the
that damn
time.
good,
Yep, you
right?
did at the time. And
So
and I just do want to add to like if there's of all the art, like we obviously have like artists that are like we're constantly seeing their work in front of us. So like we talk about what they do, like Dan Mora among others. But like Francis Manipul might be the artist that I feel like you bring up like out of nowhere most, if that makes sense. Like you clearly like this series had an impact on you just from like the art style alone. You like I noticed that quite a bit how much you like this guy's artwork.
yeah, from the because we talk about that all the time too, like all the cover work and the interiors. Usually you get hoodwinked by one, right?
Hmm.
But not the case here, right? So like the art is what drew me in, and then reading it for the first time, you just see it like the art. There's just something about, again, like I depending on the book and the tone, right? The art can really make a difference. Does the art fit the tone of the story
Right.
being told? Um, and most of the times for us, I believe that's a yes. But sometimes it's no, and that will either take us out of a book or won't. Um, but there's like I said, like with those other artists I've mentioned, they all have their own unique styles. But there's something, again, I use the word electric a lot and vibrant a lot to describe his art, and I love that because it's just so visually appealing. It just pulls you right in, right?
Yeah.
And art is subjective, so this is this is my opinion, how I view it, how I see it. But I have a feeling that when people go to read this book, they're going to walk away sort of saying the same thing, right?
There's no
It's
question
just,
that his work is vibrant. I mean, just looking at the cover that you have behind you for those who are watching on the stream and stuff. And then so it's 6 issues. I don't know if it's gonna keep going further or not. You obviously know if it has potential to do so. Do you view it as more a movie or a show?
oh, this would be a movie. This would be a movie, no doubt,
Okay.
and I think it'd be a really kick-ass movie. That's a question, that I don't know we have the answer to, but like I
No,
feel
but
like,
everything Scott's got going on right now is like being floated in some capacity to.
well, right, but in terms of like continuation, like I feel like
Oh,
all these stories are like
yeah.
one and done. I don't feel like there's going to be another arc of, we have demons. There's going to be another arc of,
We Have Demons might be the only one that there is another arc for. I'm pretty sure
oh,
Book of
maybe, right.
Evil is not the case. I'm pretty sure I don't know about Canary, for sure. And then yeah, those are only two. And I mean, you read Night of the Ghouls, so yeah, like that's
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like that might have been option two. I feel like I might have
That
read
one's
that
that
somewhere.
one's I think I remember that happening too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, like it's just a fucking great book, right?
Hmm.
Read it. Read it. Read it. I've said that many times today. Just go fucking read it. Plain and
Read,
simple.
people. It's good for you. Um
Yeah,
Now, I
but
assume that's a book that you can read pretty much anywhere, right? Like you
yes.
can okay. Now, I'm gonna tell you right now, Hellboy, the Crooked Man, you got to be careful where you read this motherfucker because the art is something, and we'll get to it in a sec. The writer for this, of course, Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy. The artist is not Mignola on this one, although obviously often is Richard Corbin. And colors are done by Dave Stewart, and then the letterer is Clem Robbins. Now, this is a 3-issue series that ran from July to September of 2008. Of course, 3-issue stories are not usually something that we do on here, but this is the first time that we're talking about Hellboy at length. So I feel like this is a good opportunity. This is a good time to do it, especially because this story is supposed to be the premise for the upcoming Hellboy reboot. Not sure on the timing on that. Didn't want to wait too long on it because the news came out fairly recently. If you want to pick this up, it is available on Hoopla. Usually I'm all about like go out and buy it, like no matter what. But at the same time, like Hellboy is big enough of a deal. One of the bigger like indie comics characters where if you go on Hoopla, obviously like you're like Mignola's gotten plenty of support over the years. This is so under the title of Hellboy Volume 10, the Crooked Man and Others. That is the name of the trade. Can get a little complicated trying to keep all the Hellboy stuff straight if you're trying to get into Hellboy because there's Hellboy in the BPRD, and there's just a lot to get to because Hellboy's been around for a long ass time. Now, specifically when it comes to the Crooked Man, the synopsis. In 1956, somewhere in the mountains of Virginia, Hellboy encounters Tom, a man who in his youth sold his soul to a backwoods demon known as the Crooked Man. Together, they travel back to the dark heart of the Appalachian Mountains to confront that demon and see if Tom's soul can't be saved. So yeah, so you already got the setting pretty much. And I thought it was in 1958 when I was reading it, but either way, those are the three main characters: the Crooked Man, Tom Farrell, and then Hellboy. Now there are other important players that are brought into the mix, but I don't want to really touch on anybody specifically, so that way it doesn't give necessarily anything away. Now, yeah, it's a short story. It moves at a good pace, and the biggest thing that will I think the biggest thing in general with Hellboy is like the art style is very specific. Like everybody knows Mignola style because if chances are if you've seen Hellboy drawn before, it's a good chance. Like in a comic, it's a good chance that Mignola did the artwork, and it's very like raw, but also at the same time, I'm trying gritty, very gritty, and like one thing that you notice often is we often don't see like the eyes of characters usually just like shades, like I said, their eyebrows covering their eyes. And I think that's like, and we don't get that with Corbin here. Corbin is a little bit different, but also still there. Like his horror style is, oh my God, like it is very freaky. And actually, oh my God, shame on me, Joe. The artist for Preacher, that's Steve Dillon, is that right?
Yes.
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 He had like the way that he draws human heads is very similar to that. The color, like it's got a different vibe though, still, because like the colors are much darker, much more faded, which works great for the setting of this story. But my goodness, like there are some like fucked up shit that Corbin draws in this. The Crooked Man in particular, man, you Joe do not want to see that character drawn at night. Oh my God, he is a freaky motherfucker. And there are quite a few other terrifying characters thrown in the mix here. This is like an old folk tale, and I love actually like I talk about Corbin's line work, but Stewart using this faded style works perfectly for the tone of the story. And what I like about it so much is that, the first page they tell you where the setting is and everything like that. But I forgot about where it was as I was reading it, because I'm like, this could also like Hellboy travels the world and stuff like that. Like BPRD is far reaching, but I honestly, and I know that they have I've read the first 4 volumes, I believe is what it is, of Hellboy. And then I've read some other stuff, single issues that have come out over the years, but they have a European like entity that's like the BPRD, BRPD. Why do I always fuck that up? Anyways, the point is that this could have been like a rural town in Europe, and you would have no idea other than maybe the accents or the attire. But even then, I think this is actually a great place to restart Hellboy, because did you see the Hellboy, the David Harbour Hellboy movie?
I did not see Smell Boy. No.
I'm sorry, what did you call it?
Smell Boy. I
Uh,
enjoyed the first 2 Hellboy movies.
okay.
Right, but I did not see the David Harbour one because people whose opinion I trust was not very favorable of that
Well,
movie.
they are not far off on that. Like that's totally fair. I think if you've read Hellboy comics, you can appreciate what they were trying to go for from an aesthetic standpoint. I need to rewatch it again because that very much stuck with me. From a storytelling aspect, that definitely had its flaws. I need to go back and rewatch it though to look at it from that angle, like from if you read the comics and can appreciate that. But from an aesthetic standpoint, you can appreciate it because again, like I talked about how it's gritty and it's raw, and that's like a very specific combination. I don't think that plays well necessarily when you're talking about live action, especially on the big screen. It was kind of tough to do. But I think that I'm hoping that they learn from that. But I think that here is like, this is a story where it's like there's plenty of like Hellboy stories that can connect over time and one volume into the next and whatnot. But there's a lot of like three issue stories for Hellboy. Like just bing bang boom, done, in, out, and anybody can pick it up as long as you have a general idea of who Hellboy is. And even then, you really don't have to have an idea of who Hellboy is. You just know he's a good guy and he tries to help out deal with monster shit, and he's kind of a monster in and of himself. Like that's if you know that kind of stuff, you're pretty much going to be fine picking up quite a few Hellboy things, especially stuff that's come out in recent years. And this is an example of that, where if you just know Hellboy exists and know, you'll figure out if he's a good guy or not. And this, as long as you know Hellboy exists, you can pick this up and you're gonna be totally fine. You get a couple extra stories after the Crooked Man as well in volume 10 of Hellboy. But I love that for getting people back into Hellboy. You don't need to go and take huge swings in this issue in this movie. You bring in Hellboy, make sure you get him right. I think it's the guy who plays Black Tom Cassidy in Deadpool, I think, is the guy who was cast as Hellboy, which, okay, maybe it'll work. I'm not entirely sure. I only know that guy for playing Black Tom Cassidy, and even then I more know about like how Deadpool used his death to go at Cable. That's really more what I remember from his performance. But from a story aspect and like the Crooked Man, like, yes, you can go and you can bring that on screen. You don't need to go crazy with the special effects here outside of Hellboy and maybe the Crooked Man. And you can just tell this story and like people can see it and enjoy it. And where where people have their gripes about the MCU, and then of course DC's trying to create its own universe as well. This is its own thing. Like, you can do it once and then probably tell a second story and have it be its own thing, and it'd be fine. And if you're into this stuff, like into the paranormal shit and some spooky stuff, like you can go and watch this one time and then not come back and watch the second one, and you'll be totally fine. So I'm very excited about it. About this being at least the foundation for the next movie, because Hellboy deserves another chance. Like I said off the top, like, when you talk about indie comics, like, I know I love Spawn, and I mention him all the time, but when you're talking about independent comics, it's pretty much, to me, it's Spawn, it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then Hellboy. I mean, those are probably the three for me above all else. So you need to give him another shot on the big screen, especially after, like, Perlman and Del Toro did a great job with those two movies.
Yeah, well, it's right in Del Toro's wheelhouse,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the thing. I think Hellboy is. I think he is known enough
Mm-hmm.
to most fans, comic book fans, right, and even non-comic book fans, like
Yeah.
Hellboy, right. I think it's pretty iconic. Now, you take me for example. I've never read a single Hellboy comic. I watched both the first two movies with Del Toro, and loved them. They were
Mm-hmm.
great, right? And the Harbor one, just I'm just not gonna. But
Well, no, of
what
course. I mean, I wouldn't tell Joe. You've, especially not having read Hellboy, I wouldn't tell you to go watch it. I absolutely
but
would.
but that's the thing, is that there's such a massive amount of uh you know you know books to work with here, right? Like,
Yeah.
the universe and everything about Hellboy. Like, I know enough. Like, there's good stories to be told there.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that if they're gonna sort of kickstart Hellboy again, they're doing something based off a series that was only 3 books long. Because that way, if people like me want to go, we can read it
Yep.
and go, okay, there's this should be great. It will I can read it in a day, and I don't have to spend a ton of money, and get a fairly good idea of sort of what to expect, or get a little bit more familiar, with the character, versus having to, like, oh, they're
Mm-hmm.
pulling it from this arc, which is 30 books long, and out of those 30 books they might only use X amount of it. Like, if you're going to be telling a story based off something that's only 3 issues long, generally, like, there's a good expectation of what you read is sort of what you're going to get. And they might
Mm-hmm.
take some liberties here, make some few subtle changes there, but,
Sure.
like, I like that idea, and I love the look of Hellboy. I've always kind of, uh like, from an outside looking in, going, oh, he's a badass character. Like I said, I watched the movies, and at least the first two, and absolutely enjoyed them. So
Mm-hmm.
I really do hope that they can get some good buzz, for this character, because I think if they could pull people in, then people will get more exposed to the character, to Mike Mignola's work in general, which
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't just do Hellboy, he does other stuff, and I've read his other stuff, and it's all really, really good. So I feel like Mignola too is like one of those writers that kind of slips under the radar. Like, you forget how good he is, and how sort of prolific his writing has
Oh
been
yeah,
over
I
the
mean, well,
years.
that's why when we talk about, like, when I say, like, there's plenty of there's a great share of amazing independent comics. Like, obviously Sandman was Vertigo, but that was like an indie comics label. And then we talk about Preacher all the time, and that got turned into a show. But, like, the thing is that when I say Spawn and TMNT, and I know TMNT is, like, more viewed as a show these days, but it started out as a comic. And then you go to Hellboy, those are three, like, legacy indie characters. Like, you don't
Yeah.
have a whole hell of a lot of those. And also, too, one thing that I think is important to know, in the first two Hellboy movies, and I can't remember what happened in the Harbor one on this front, but we have the BPRD featured in both of those
Mm.
movies. In the Crooked Man, you do not see the BPRD. This is Hellboy riding solo with that character Tom Farrell coming into the mix, and then a few other players. I think that Hellboy, like, can do just fine carrying it on his own. Like, he obviously, from a story, like from a comic standpoint, he absolutely can. So hopefully the casting turns out well, because that's going to be significantly important in this movie.
Now this is something I just thought of because like aesthetically too, like McNolan's
Mm,
got a great look and all that, but like Hellboy in general, you need
yeah,
a pretty significant budget, I think, to do it justice, right?
probably.
And so I'm wondering if like would Hellboy thrive and maybe catch on a little bit more if it was animated.
Well, funny you should ask, because I did jot that down as well. If you're interested in watching Hellboy in animated form or just getting to know the character, or maybe you know somebody who doesn't read comics but wants to get to know Hellboy a little bit, there are two animated films that are out in the ether. One I know is available on Amazon Prime for like $1.99. It's been a while since I watched the two of them. I feel like I like them both. I know there's one for sure that I like, but I can't remember which one. We have Hellboy, Sword of Storms, and Hellboy, Blood and Iron. So if you want to go check those out, two animated movies. That one I know is Blood and Iron is available on Amazon Prime for $1.99. I can't seem to find where Sort of Storms. It looks like Apple TV, but $3.99 there. So, anyways, so there are some animated movies that you can pick those up, and I feel like I've seen them. Like I don't know if it was a comic shop or a Newberry. Something like that. But I saw like the movie somewhere like available as like a Blu-ray 2 disc set or something like that. So yeah,
What's a Blu-ray? Who the fuck uses Blu-rays, Nicholas? Come on.
isn't that they only sell Blu-rays now, right?
Psh,
What do they
psh.
sell now? I don't buy them, so I don't even know.
Yeah, you stream that shit, Nicholas. Come on. Come
Oh
on.
no, but I'm saying
Come
if
on.
you can't stream, what the fuck?
Come
I'm
on.
trying to help the
Come
people,
on.
John. I'm worried about the people, not about your ass. You'll figure it out. But yeah, so Hellboy, the Crooked Man. It's volume 10 of Hellboy. Go pick that shit up if you want to get to know Hellboy. I think this is a great spot for this character to be reintroduced to everybody.
Love that. Absolutely love that.
All
Awesome shit.
right. And that does it for the 77th mainline issue of TLDR, Joseph. We will be back, I think with another mainline episode next week. That is the plan at this juncture, but you never know. So make sure you subscribe to the show in audio form because you never know what's going to pop up at some point down the line. Not making any promises, but I'm just saying. Until next week, Joe, stay sexy.
You know it.